You know that if something is called a clause, it has a subject and a verb. And if something is called an adverb, it modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. An adverb clause is a type of dependent or subordinate clause that modifies a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. It almost always begins with a trigger word called a subordinating conjunction. Here's a list of the most common ones. Try memorizing a few of these until you can easily spot them based on their work in a sentence. You will find adverb clauses easily. They almost always begin or end a sentence. Let's look at some examples. Because he loved to fish, Wilbur bought a bass boat. Begin by finding the trigger word, which is always at the beginning of the dependent or subordinate clause. Here it is, because. Now find the rest of the clause. You'll need a subject and a verb. Here we have he for our subject and loved for our verb, with to fish functioning as a direct object. So, because he loved to fish is our adverb clause. What does it modify? We know it can't modify Wilbur or boat because they are nouns. It must modify the verb bought. Let's test it by using our adverb questions. Where, when, why, how, to what extent, and under what conditions. Bought where? No, that doesn't work. Bought when? No again. Bought why? Because he loved to fish. Here's a tip about adverb clauses. When they are at the beginning of sentences, like here, they are almost always followed by commas. Let's look at a few more. Even though Claude didn't feel like eating, he made breakfast. First, find the trigger word, even though. Obviously, this is a two-word trigger. Because it's at the beginning of the sentence, I can assume that when I get to a comma, I'll have found the whole clause. And that's true here. There's my comma. Claude did feel is my verb. So my adverb clause is, even though Claude didn't feel like eating. And I'm left with a main clause, he made. So what does it modify? Because it's an adverb, it can only modify made. There is no other word in the main clause it could possibly modify. But let's test it anyway. Made where? No. Made when? No. Made why? No. Made under what condition? Even though Claude didn't feel like eating. That works. Here's another. The sailor swabbed the deck until he could eat off it. We don't have any commas here to signal the adverb clause, but we do have a trigger word, until. The clause is, until he could eat off it. It modifies the verb swabbed. Swabbed to what extent? Until he could eat off of it. Jorge was angry because I ate his cupcake. Here our trigger word is because, a very common subordinating conjunction. And our adverb clause is because I ate his cupcake. Jorge should take better care of his pastries. Anyway, since linking verbs can almost never be modified, our clause must modify the predicate adjective angry. Let's test it out. Angry why? Because I ate his cupcake. Boris devoured the burger much faster than I did. The subordinating conjunction, the trigger word, is than, which makes than I did the adverb clause, with I being the subject and did being the verb in my clause. The whole clause modifies the adverb faster. The questions get a little funky when our clauses modify adverbs. In what manner did Boris devour faster? Faster than I did. Like I said, funky. On occasion, your adverb clause will seem to be incomplete. It will be missing a verb. In those cases, the verb is implied. It's still there in theory, just not on paper. Those clauses are called elliptical clauses. Let's look at an example. Saturday was gloomier than any other day that week. Our trigger word, again, is than, and our clause is than any other day that week. Obviously, we are missing a verb. If we were being very formal, we would have said Saturday was gloomier than any other day that week was gloomy. Since that sounds a bit odd, a bit stilted, we just lop off the end and are left with a more natural sounding sentence. What does this adverb clause modify? The adverb gloomier. To what extent was it gloomier? Gloomier than any other day that week.